Just a quick video response, actually an extension to a conversation I was just having with a gentleman at the grocery store. We were both in a hurry. He has kids with him and stuff like that, so I couldn't really go into such great detail. But the conversation was essentially about multiculturalism, how he embraces diversity, and I don't mean to offend him. I gave him the URL to the website. Hopefully we can carry on with our conversation. Hopefully he has questions, or if he wants to give me more of his point of view, whatever it may be. This guy seemed receptive to hearing me out, so again, I don't want to insult him, but just to make my point here, he seemed to be about as clueless as a person could possibly be when it comes to race or anything, especially the people who are behind these things. So to this guy, everything seems okay. This shift in demographics in his particular little town, the one I'm living in now that he's grown up in, has seemed subtle to him. Okay, it went from pretty much being 100% white to being under 80% at this point in time. Now, that's a drastic difference in a short time, of course, but this guy hasn't quite felt the effects yet because his people haven't been completely displaced. His culture hasn't been completely washed away, so he doesn't feel the effects. The few non-white faces he sees are smiling, and they're fitting in for the most part. He enjoys Mexican food and stuff like that. That's what this guy was telling me, as if, we couldn't make Mexican food ourselves. Whatever the case may be, the point is he's just embracing diversity without understanding the situation that we're in, what this is leading to. And a quick point to him I can make is the fact that I was once in Miami, which was almost all white, a lot more white than it is now, let's put it that way, and in just a short lifetime, my own, there's pretty much no whites left. Now, if you're going to allow that to happen in one city, another city, and I mean countless cities across every European country, every white country across the globe, then eventually there's going to be no one left. Okay, there's no white people left in Miami for the most part. Pretty soon there will not be. White culture has been completely destroyed. The people have been displaced. Now, if that's happening in Miami, it's going to happen here. It's happening slowly. Again, frogs in the boiling water. They're not going to do this overnight, but it's happening nonetheless. Make it sound like a positive thing. They make you sound like a complete asshole, a racist, a hateful person if you resist it. So, all the obstacles are in his way to keep him from seeing this happening. He's not going to see it until it's too late. Just as I didn't see it right away, just as a lot of people don't see things coming, at least back when we didn't have the information that we have now, just the ability to see the other side, to hear the other side of the story. So things are a lot more clear now than they were when I was a kid. Very few people had access to the facts then. Even if you didn't know, or even if you knew that things weren't quite right, you didn't know why. You didn't understand. You didn't know why you didn't quite fit in. I mean, there's no surprise here. You don't have to guess as to why suddenly in your town, which used to be completely safe, you could leave your doors unlocked. You never had to worry about your children getting beat up, your wife or your daughter getting raped, your house being robbed, anything like that. And then as the demographics shift to being increasingly non-white, then suddenly you have to start doing these things now, locking your doors and paying attention to what your kids are doing and so on and so forth. And people just, I guess they assume, well, that's just the cost of, civilization moving forward. I mean, as if we're progressing. They just accept it. Again, frogs in the boiling water. These things happen slowly. It's not like they went from having a safe society where everything was perfect one day, and then the next day all of a sudden all hell's breaking loose when obviously 1 million or 2 million black folks moved in, or non-whites, whoever they may be. And it's obvious. No, these people don't see it because again, I say it's not obvious. It is obvious. It's painfully obvious, but they're so brainwashed that they attribute it to other things, socioeconomic reasons, and so on and so forth. So even when they can see, wait a minute, we had a lot of non-whites moving into our town, into our small town here, and suddenly things aren't safe, and suddenly, I have to lock my doors, and I have to worry about my children, my daughter, my wife, and everything else. Then, they write it off as, okay, well, maybe these black folks or these non-whites have something to do with it, but then they excuse the behavior. They start thinking, well, they're just less fortunate. We need to reach out to them. We need to help them. We need to do something for them. The responsibility is ultimately in our hands. We need to do something about it. We need to do something to help these people out, and that's all they need. They can be just like us if we help them out. So this guy who was fortunate enough to grow up in a town that was predominantly white, almost entirely white, I wish I had that luxury, of course, but nonetheless he does, and he doesn't understand what is being lost here. He doesn't see what's coming. And when push comes to shove, white folks aren't going to do anything until they're cornered. It's not in our nature to attack people, to do things even in our own best interest, unless it is completely justified. That's why the Jews go to such lengths to get us into wars. They have to go and tell such huge lies and make both sides feel they're being victimized, false flag operations, so on and so forth, just to get us to fight. We have to feel like we're being cornered, that we have no other alternative. So that's where we're at, and if people like him don't see it, then they're not going to feel any need to fight back because they don't see anything wrong with what's going on in the first place. So there's a sense of urgency in people like us who know what's going on, who can foresee the future. We see exactly where this is going. Again, on a small scale, I saw it in my own two eyes. I experienced it in one city. This is happening everywhere, but then, it's one city, then it's one state, then it's one country, then it's the whole damn planet. We're no longer in this city, we're no longer in this state, in this country, and we're no longer going to be here. If it's happening on a small scale, as it is, as we have countless examples to point to, unfortunately, again, Detroit, New Orleans, St. Louis, Miami, Atlanta, L.A., New York, I mean, you just name it. You just name whatever city comes to mind, and even worse of all, in Europe, of course. And then you look at these places, and they're falling apart. They're a shell of their former self. There's nothing, they're almost unrecognizable. If you were to jump back 50 years, and compare images and compare the lifestyle, compare the safety and just the environment. Now you have the broken windows effect. You have all kinds of trash everywhere. People don't give a damn. There's crime, violent crime at that. And nobody, neighbors aren't helping neighbors and stuff like that. Greetings, hey, how you doing today? Good morning, and all that stuff, which died, and it will die along with the white race. The more that we become a minority, the less and less you're going to see those positive attributes that are part of our culture. They're part of our culture because of who we are. Our culture is a representation of the average white person, just like everyone else's culture is a representation of the average person of that race. Culture didn't create these people. The people created the culture. Of course, that's obvious. I'm not going to ever say that nurture doesn't play a role. Nature and nurture play a role. Again, this seems obvious to me. But our culture, our way of life, dies with us. Even if these weren't good things, even if these weren't positive attributes. And you have to think about this. We're being punished, essentially, for being kind, empathetic, do-gooders, essentially. We put other people above ourselves. Our very nature is to do that. It was part of our survival instincts, of our survival tactics, surviving the cold, harsh winters, and just basically the evolutionary process that brought about the white race. We had to do these things. These are positive attributes. There's not a single person in the world who would say, well, it's a bad thing to be empathetic. It's a bad thing to be kind. It's a bad thing to be courteous. It's a bad thing to help your neighbor. Of course not. They'll take advantage of it. They might laugh at us now because, they're foolish enough to allow us to come over here and get a free ride and then to curse them on the back end and all this other nonsense. And just a quick point to this guy, because he seemed to think that whites were in charge. I tried to point this out to him briefly, but if whites were in charge, why would there be affirmative action programs that are against whites? Government-sanctioned, government-enforced racist policies against the majority population. Why would we do that to ourselves? Why would we open our borders and commit genocide against ourselves? Why would we have laws that forbid us from questioning the Jewish version of history? Lies. Again, why would we commit genocide against our own people? That's just the one thing you have to keep thinking about here. It wouldn't happen. That lets you know right away who's in charge. That lets you know right away who's in control. All of the anti-white propaganda that we see in the media. It's not the white man who controls the media. Of course not. So, I've gone over that before, so I don't want to get too caught up in that. But only a Jew, just to speak to the point here and jumping ahead, because I'm not going to mince my words, only a Jew, only this creature known as the Jew, would look at a group of people who are kind and courteous and empathetic and view them as being naive. They're ripe for the plucking, for the picking, and let's go ahead and take advantage of these people. Ultimately, let's kill these people. So you might have the best, pretty much a utopian society in whatever country, Norway, really doesn't matter, Germany, you just name it, a European country, essentially is my point, where the people, a natural disaster comes, they help each other out. Their neighbor needs something, they help them out. They're kind, they're empathetic to the point that they're doing this for people who don't even look anything like them, for people who are openly calling for their heads. So anyways, the genuine kind nature of these people, only a Jew would witness that and want to destroy it. and the people who comprise that culture, who create that culture. It's a beautiful thing. It's a work of art. It's special. It's unique. These people are unique. Only a Jew would want to destroy that. I wouldn't want to destroy an African tribe who haven't even invented the wheel, right? They might be primitive, but they're still unique and special, have a right to exist, and I would fight to defend them. And I think most people who would take the time to listen to this video would feel the same way, even if they're non-white, because I'm not going to condemn non-whites entirely, of course not. They're kind and empathetic, great people, intelligent people of other races as well, which is why I point out that only Jews would do this. The other people might be envious. They might want to take advantage of us. They might want to take the opportunity that the Jews present them with and engage in parasitic behavior themselves, which is what they are doing. There are non-whites who will stand up, don't get me wrong, but they're few and far between. They don't have an obligation to stand up for us. I'm not suggesting that they do any more than we have an obligation to carry them on our backs, which is what we're doing at the cost of our own race, of our own existence. But whatever the case may be, only a Jew would view something that's unique and special and want to destroy it. Even the best of the Gentiles should be killed. That is what they live by. That is their motto. They want to destroy us. Even the best of us need to be destroyed. And that's exactly what they've been doing, destroying the best of us. And to speak to this guy a little bit further, a lot of people, specifically non-whites, take for granted the fact that whites have pretty much given us everything that we, as far as technology goes, that we enjoy today. I mean, we take it for granted, the system, the road system, the power grids, and all these things, the cars that are on the road, the engineering that's behind all these things, the very computer that you're watching this video on right now, the power supply that's energizing it. It just never ends. And when you want to talk about a place that was, it's like South Africa, for instance, that was controlled by whites that no longer is, it's falling apart. No surprise. Or you want to go to a place where whites really never had that much of an input. They don't have any of these things other than gifts that were given to them, right? Things that were donated to them. If they're wearing Nikes, if they're wearing clothes from the West, they got it from the West. They didn't create it themselves. So I'm just making the point that a lot of things are taken for granted. And if you look at the decline of the white populace, or the percentage of whites in any given population, the standard of living also goes down. The roads start falling apart. Everything starts crumbling at the seams. Of course, non-whites can do jobs. They can fill a role, but they're not going to do it as well, or they're not going to further that technology. Just because you can drive a bus doesn't mean that you can invent the wheel, let alone create an automobile from the ground up. Same thing goes with a pilot or anyone else who's simply filling a role, learning a trade, or doing a job. That doesn't make you someone who is actually contributing to society, to our collective good in a positive manner, especially when you consider that programs like affirmative action have forced us to put people in these positions who otherwise do not deserve to be there. We have to lower our standards just for them to do the basics, just for them to have a role in our society. Otherwise, if it was based on merit alone, these people would be left behind, the vast majority of them. They wouldn't even have a chance. The Jews know this, and that's why they force us to put these people in these positions, oftentimes in positions of power over us. Anybody could do a job. I mean, there was basically a post a couple of days ago, or maybe a week ago or so, about the firefighters in New York, the fire department in New York being forced by the federal government to hire 300-plus non-whites who are underqualified. Not only that, but there was a lawsuit, a class action suit, where every non-white who applied since like 1999 is guaranteed a certain percentage of that money just for applying. Because supposedly the tests were discriminatory in nature, because they were testing people on their basic intelligence, and that shouldn't really have anything to do with putting out a fire. That's the argument, essentially, that it's racially biased and all this nonsense. But the point is, that I'm making at least, is the standards are being lowered. So when you lower these standards, and you have someone that can just barely do a job, especially a job where your life might be depending on them being a little bit more than competent in doing their job, or just barely competent. These things are important. These things are an obvious clue as to why this country is falling apart. Just one of the many reasons, of course.